Hello students, today we're going to talk about rates as comparisons. We will be building on our understanding of rates and what we learned yesterday, and discuss how we can now compare rates in real world situations. So this should be page number 102 for you, so make sure that you write that 102 in that top right hand corner. And then let's go ahead and get right into it. So for our example, right here at the top of our notes page, it says the travel agent is preparing 3 different car rental quotes for their customers, as shown in the tables below. So looking at the first box, it says thrifty voyage, and it gives you a table, and it says the numbers of days, 3, 5, 8, 9, and then the total cost for each of those. So if you rent a car for 3 days, that would be $109.50. 5 days would be $182.50, and so on and so forth. Now, because they give us our rate of days to total cost, we have to find our unit rate down here. It says cost for 1 day. And the way that we find our unit rate, based off of yesterday's lesson, is we take your total cost and then you divide it by your number of days, because your question asks for cost for 1 day. So your cost comes first. So for time's sake, I'm just going to go ahead and give you what that would be. If you take 109.50 and divide it into 3 even groups, you would get $36.50 per day if you were to divide that out. So that's our cost for 1 day. That would be our unit rate because we're talking about 1 day. Okay. For a frugal ride, we have our number of days as well, 2, 4, 7, and 8 on the left side of our table. And then on the right side, it has all of the costs for those. So if you rent it for 2 days, it's going to cost you $71.50. So on and so forth. So if I wanted to find the cost for that for 1 day, I would take my cost and divide it by my number of days. So I can take any of those values, but I'm going to go with the smallest one, $71.50, and I'm going to divide it by 2. And if I was to divide that out with long division, that would come out to $35.75 per day. Okay, so far, frugal ride is cheaper than thrifty voyage at $35.75 versus $36.50. Now for value vehicles, same concept. You have your number of days on the left side, 3, 5, 7, and 9, and then you have your total cost if you were to rent for that number of days. Now if we take our $111 and divide it by 3, we would end up with $37 flat. And that would be your cost for 1 day. So, knowing all of these values, it says, what is the cost of renting a car for 10 days from Thrifty Voyage, Frugal Ride, and Value Vehicles? Well, since we know our unit rate, since we know how much they cost per day, all we have to do is take these numbers here and just multiply them by 10. So if we do that, we would essentially just be moving our decimal over to the right 1 time, okay, because we're multiplying by a power of 10. So that would make Thrifty Voyage $365 for 10 days. That would make Frugal Ride $357.50 for 10 days. And Value Vehicle $370.50. So it's super important when dealing with rates to be able to find your unit rate so that you can then compare to a bigger number. If you know your unit rate, then all you have to do is multiply that number by however much the question is asking. So now for B, it says, which car rental shop is the best value for a 10-day rental? Well, whatever is the cheapest is going to be the best day value or best value for a 10-day rental, and it looks like Frugal Ride has won at $357.50. That would be the cheapest. So Frugal Ride is the best value. Okay, so all we did for all of these was we found our unit rate by taking our total cost and dividing it by the number of days for each. And then after that, we multiplied our number by 10. So following those notes, farther down at the bottom of the page, it says types of rates. We're going to identify the different types of rates. Rates can be useful in comparing different quantities so that problems can be solved. So we use rates to compare different types of quantities. Quantities are just amounts. It's another word for amounts. Rates can be solved using tape diagrams or proportions just like a ratio. So for example, we can use rates to find prices or speed, right? How fast are you going down the road compared to how many miles you're driving. So miles per hour. Again, we just use them to compare different types of quantities or units of measurement, really. So now, for question number 1, it says, use your understanding of rates to answer the questions below. A manufacturing line can produce 15 widgets in 2 minutes. How many widgets can the line produce in 30 minutes? Okay, so in order to solve this, what we're going to do is we're going to take our minutes or our widgets compared to our minutes, because those are the two things that we're comparing here. And we're going to write them as a proportion. So for every 15 widgets, we've got 2 minutes. Okay? So now what I can do, the goal is to get to 30 minutes. That's the question. How many widgets, so we need to know how many widgets can the line produce in 30 minutes. Okay? So now what we can do is we can find our unit rate. So we can divide both of these by 2 to get to 1. Half of 15 is going to be 7.5. And then from there, we can multiply by 30. So all I did was take my rate, brought it down to a unit rate by dividing by 2. And now I'm going to scale back up by multiplying by 30 because I had to go from 1 to 30. So now I'm going to take my 7.5 and I'm going to multiply it by 30. I get to drop this 0 down and be done with that. Now 3 times 5 is 15. Carry that 1. 3 times 7 is 21. Plus that 1 would be 22. I got to move my decimal over once into my answer. So I know that the widgets that would be made in the line within 30 minutes would be 225 based off of my proportion. So all I did was solve my rate by using a proportion table, by comparing my widgets to my minutes. And I found my unit rate and then scaled back up to the 30 minutes that it was asking. Again, question number 2 is very similar. It says a dripping faucet leaks 10 milliliters in 3 minutes. How many minutes will it take to produce 140 milliliters of water? Okay, so again, we're comparing milliliters to 3 minutes. So you can take your ml compared to minutes, because those are our 2 units of measurement here. And they said for every 10 milliliters is 3 minutes. Now the question says, how many minutes will it take? So minutes is the key here. We're looking for minutes. That's our question mark. Will it take to produce 140 milliliters of water? So my 140 needs to go up here with my other milliliters of water. Now, the goal is to get from 10 milliliters of water to 140 milliliters of water. Now, I know that scaling up by 14 would get me from 10 to 140 because 10 times 14 is 140. So now all I have to do is scale my 13 by 14. Or not my 13, my 3 by 14. Okay? So you don't always have to take your rates down to a unit rate. We don't always have to divide to get to 1 and then multiply up. like we did with the last problem. But sometimes it's easier to do that depending on the question. In this case, it was easier to just scale up from 10 milliliters to 140. So that's what we did. So now I'm going to go ahead and take 3 and multiply it by 14. 14 times 3. 3 times 4 I know is 12. I'm going to carry that 1. 3 times 1 is 3. Plus that other one would make it 4. So 42. 42 minutes would get me to 140 milliliters of water. Make sure that this notes page makes it in your math binder and get ready for your next rotation.